I went into rabbinical school really not to become a rabbi. That plan didn't work out so well. I started rabbinical school because I fell in love with learning our texts. Many of you know I did not have a Jewish day school background. Very robust religious school education, a lot of private tutoring and trips to Israel, and I was in shul every single week, and camp and youth group, and a lot of my Jewish learning was through osmosis. It was not until my second semester of junior year of college that I took a semester off, went to Israel, studied in yeshiva for the first time, and really was exposed to traditional texts in Hebrew. And I think that I went into rabbinical school assuming, erroneously as it turns out, that being a rabbi is about studying Jewish texts all day and teaching them. You can spend an enormous percentage of your work and life as a rabbi not with your nose in the books. And I've embraced that because being a rabbi is so many other things, which I love to do as well, and helping to run and lead a community and be with people in times of distress and all the things that a rabbi does. But I still like studying our tradition, and I try to study a little bit every day. There's an interesting confluence of things in my life for the last few weeks. The clergy, those of you who may have seen Thursday morning, we start studying a tractate of Mishnah together around Hanukkah so that we can have a Siyyum completed on Erev Pesach so that those who are firstborn males can have the Siyyum rather than fast. So we did that together. And then a year ago, Rabbi Chaim Teref, who's the Rav Beit of Pressman Academy, his father passed away. And one of the things that people sometimes do in someone's memory is organize what's called Siyyum Hashas, learning the entire Mishnah, divided up into different people, and every people are encouraged to claim a tractate. And I claimed a tractate, and then forgot about it for 11 and a half months, and was reminded by Rabbi T in an email, and had to kind of microwave my learning. And then I learn a little piece of Talmud every day. I don't do Daf Yomi, a full page of Talmud every day. I'm amazed by those who do. I do Daf Shvui, a page of Talmud a week. That is already a lot for me. And it just so happens that a few weeks ago, we finished Masechet Beitzah, the tractate of Talmud that is called Beitzah, which means egg, because it has to do principally with the laws of Yom Tov, of Yantif, which is appropriate for today. And it begins with a discussion of what is the status of an egg that is born to a chicken on Yantif. Can it or can it not be eaten? So 2 weeks ago, I think, in Pilch Hall, I did the first half of this Siyyum for Masechet Beitzah, and now I'm going to complete it. I have this wonderful set of Gemara on my shelf, which I never open because now it's all on the Safari app and on computer. But I like holding this. It's like that scene from Frisco Kid. I have read this book. I understand one word of it. No, I did understand it, but Talmud is very, very complicated, and I want to share with you either 3 or 4 quick sections, and including the last one, because you always do the last section of Talmud before you do Siyyum, and then we'll say the long Kaddish, and then we'll be done. Okay, so this is slightly out of order in terms of how it appears in the tractate. Source 1, Beitzah, page 16a. Most of what I'm going to bring today is what we call agadata, stories rather than laws, although it deals with laws. Tanya, we learned in an earlier rabbinic text, Amru alav al Shammai Hazaken. They used to say this about the elder Shammai, not the Shammai and Hillel that you know of, but ancestors of them by a couple of generations. Kol yamav haya ochel lichvod Shabbat. Every day that he would eat, he was already thinking about what he was going to eat on Shabbat. How so? Matzah beheiman na'ah. If he found a choice animal, one that he could shecht and make a nice steak out of, omer, he would say, I'm not going to eat this Monday. I'm not going to eat this Tuesday. Zola Shabbat. I'm going to save it for Shabbos, like the story in the Gemara of Yosef Mokir Shabbos. We do anything to make a Shabbos nicer. Matzah acheret. And let's say after he found that first one, he found another one. Na'eh himena, even more nice. Meiniach hatashniya. He would take the second one and reserve that one for Shabbat. Ve'ochel et harishona. And eat the first one. So he would keep upgrading his food options so that by the time he got to the end of the week, the nicest and most special food he ate during the week was on Shabbat. That's a lovely approach to making Shabbat special. And Beit Hillel, the elder, disagrees completely. Aval Hillel Hazaken, the elder Hillel would say, Midah acheret haitalo. He had a different approach. Shakol masav l'shem shemayim. Why are you waiting for Shabbat to have a peak moment? All of God's deeds. All of God's creations are extraordinary, and everything that Hillel would do during the week would be dedicated to heaven. I'm not waiting for Shabbat to reach the top of the mountain. Shinamar, he would quote the verse from Tehillim, Baruch Adonai, bless God, Yom Yom, every day. Not just bless God on Shabbos, bless God Tuesday, bless God Monday. Tanya Nami Hachi. There was another version of this little teaching that was taught in a short little burst of an aphorism. Beit Shammai Omrim, Beit Shammai would say, this is tight Hebrew/Aramaic, Mechad Shabayich L'Shabtayach. From the first day of your Sheva, of your week, L'Shabtayach. Start thinking about Shabbat. The only thing that was important to Shammai about Sunday morning was that it gave him his first opportunities to prepare for Shabbat. Sunday morning doesn't exist to him, only Shabbat. Hillel would say, Baruch Adonai Yom Yom, bless God every day. Now, there are two ways of understanding, at least two ways of understanding what's animating Hillel. I want to share with you Rashi's understanding of it, and then my understanding of it. And I don't know which one of us is right. Probably Rashi. Usually, if it's between Rashi and me, it's probably Rashi. Okay? What does Rashi understand about Hillel's perspective? When Rashi says that everything is done l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, Rashi says, source 2, Boteach, he would trust, shetizdamein lo l'shabbat. He would trust that even if he eats this choice animal now, God will provide him an even nicer one between now and then. According to Rashi, Hillel was living out a certain theology that suggests God would not disappoint. God will eventually provide the nicer thing for Shabbat. I don't know. I somehow think that if you read Rashi that way, then Rashi is more like Shammai than the story seems to make it out to be, because Hillel seems to be very different than Shammai here. If Rashi's saying is the reason why I'm not setting this one aside for Shabbat is because I believe that God will set me another one, it's my way of saying I'm still only living for Shabbat. Whereas I see the Talmud saying, Hillel saying, what am I living for now? I'm living for now. If you want to be stark about it, I don't know that I'm going to make it to Shabbat. Right? Raise your hand if you are certain you're going to make it to next Shabbat. Right, to quote Rabbi Jacob Preston, I think was quoting Jack Benny, but I could be wrong. I've told the story many times. My first day on the job, July of 2009, I called up Rabbi Pressman of blessed memory. He wasn't of blessed memory then. He was very much alive. And I said, I was his double successor. Right? I was 2 rabbis after him. And I said, I'd like to take you out to lunch. He said, that would be wonderful. I said, how does next Wednesday sound? And he said, my son, I no longer buy green bananas. I said, how about tomorrow? He said, that'll be better. I read Hillel as taking a Rabbi Jack Pressman approach to it. I'm going to make today exquisite and extraordinary. If I make it a Shabbat, I'll find a way to make that extraordinary as well. But my understanding of Baruch Adonai Yom Yom, blessed be God every day, is that's my obligation to turn today into a piece of heaven. Yes, Michael. Yes. So that's the first piece. 2 different approaches to life. Do we store up, right? I mean, so there are extremes of both, right? If it's a good thing to save. It's not a good thing to hoard. We teach our children, from your first paycheck, put money away so you have it when you get older. But don't never spend on yourself, because you don't know if you'll ever be able to enjoy your IRA. You don't know that. So there's a balance between these 2 polarities. I struggle with that internally all the time. I am a saver, and I'm glad that I'm a saver, because since I was a saver from high school, I can afford things that I might not have been able to afford if I weren't a saver. But sometimes I'm not sure if I spend enough on myself and on the people who matter, because I'm always want to make sure there's stuff in that account. But the account that matters, life, today. So the Talmud was aware of that balancing act as well. Okay, second source. We jump ahead a couple of pages to source number 3, page 29b in Masechet Beitzah. Also a piece of Agadata, a piece of story. Darash Rava bar Rav Huna Zute apitcha dinaharda. A rabbi named Rava, the son of Rav Huna, and he was known as the little one. Zute means the little Rav, the little Rava. I don't know if that was a diminutive, he was short, or there was a way of like poking him, or maybe he was actually, sometimes the Talmud goes the opposite. He may have been a very giant man, and so they called him Shorty, right? And he was giving a Dvar Torah at the gates of Naharda'a, which is one of the towns in Babylonia where the Jews lived. And he gave the following law. Shonin kemach b'yom tov. You are allowed to sift wheat a second time on Yom Tov. Remember, most of this tractate is dealing with what is permissible and is not permissible on Yom Tov, and he's taking a lenient position that says the first sifting of wheat you cannot do on Yom Tov, because that is preparing the wheat to be used, and you're not allowed to do that on Yom Tov. But the reason why you're sifting it a second time is to make it finer, but not to make it usable. And since you're only refining it, he's taking the lenient position. That's not a prohibited act. You're allowed to improve your already usable wheat on Yom Tov. Okay, that's besides the point here, but that's just what he's teaching. Amar lahu Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said to him, Kuku va'amaru le la'aba. He didn't say to him, he said to the students who were listening, go and tell Abba. Abba means Rava. I know that sounds confusing. Rava, the name Rava, is a shortening of Rav Abba. And Abba doesn't only mean father, Abba was also a name. Still is to this day. Abba Elimelech. I was working in the factory on the kibbutz that I lived at after high school for a good month before I realized that the foreman didn't have 17 children. Because everyone kept calling him Abba. Abba, Abba, Abba. Until I realized that his name was Abba. I had never met someone named Abba before. I just thought, okay, he was very prolific. He had a lot of children. Okay? So Rav Nachman says to the students, go tell Abba, meaning that rabbi who is giving you this ruling that says you're allowed to sift wheat on second time Yom Tov, shkila tevutach, this is kind of like a curse or a sharp statement. Your goodness, your value has been removed, v'shadei ach yizrei, and it's been thrown out upon the thorns. What does that mean yet? We don't know. Puk chaze kamem maholata hadran benaharda. Go see how many sieves there are in Naharda. Anyone piece together what he's saying here? Almost the opposite. He's saying, you think we need you to tell us that this act is permissible on Yom Tov? Every woman has a sieve to make sure that she can sift her wheat a second time on Yom Tov. In other words, we don't need your learning. We don't need your wisdom. We know it already, right? It's an interesting thing for the rabbis to include a story in the Talmud of one rabbi telling another rabbi, enough teaching, you're a blowhard, everybody knows this. Basically what is being said, your goodness is wasted. Go teach another topic. The Vetu de Rav Yosef, the wife of Rav Yosef, Nahala Kimcha Agava de Maholta. She was being very from, and she was sifting her wheat on the convex side of a sieve rather than a concave side, right? That's very hard to do, right? Think of a funeral when we tell people that you should start shoveling with the convex side of a shovel because it's very hard to do. So imagine that you're sifting. Imagine trying to put flour on the round side of a sieve and do it this way. And why might she be doing it? Because she might be saying to herself, okay, I'll accept that it's okay to sift my flour a second time on Yom Tov, but I want to do what's called k'la'achar yad, in a different way that it's normally done to show that I'm respecting Yom Tov, and maybe that'll be my homage to frumkeit. Amarla, he said to his wife, Chazi, look woman, look wife, da'ana rifta me'alyata ba'ena. I need good bread. Meaning what? Sift the normal way. I want good bread on this Yom Tov, right? And if you sift it that way, then the second sifting, which is to make the flour finer, which is to make the bread better, is going to be less effective because it's very hard to sift on the backside of a sieve. Like, I don't need your extra frumkeit. I just want good bread on this day of Yom Tov. Okay? Devetu de Rav Ashi. So that this second story of this page seems to, like, it's both raising up this woman as interested in observing things the right way, but then being somewhat castigated by her husband, saying, you're almost more frum than you need to be because I want good bread. And then this story changes around the tone. Devetu de Rav Ashi's wife, Nahala Kimcha Agava de Fatora. She was sifting it onto a table as opposed to what? What? A bowl, right? If you're sifting, where do you want the flour to be? In a container, you can use it. Imagine how frustrating it would be to sift onto a table, and then you have to collect the flour from the table to use anything with it. So again, she's trying to be extra careful because she wants to show that she's not sifting it the way she would do it if it were in Yantif. She's sifting it in a special yantiftic way. Amar Ravashi said, Hadidan. Literally, that means this one of ours. It's actually an affectionate way of referring to his wife, my wife. But the language literally means this one of ours. Berate de Rami Barchama. She's the daughter of Rami Barchana. Rami Barchama Mara de Ovadahava. Rabbi Barchama is a substantive guy. He knows what he's talking about. He knows halacha. The ilav de Chazai mi Beinasha. Had she not seen her own father do it this way, la hava abda. She would have done it that way, which is a praise of her, right? Basically saying, if she's doing it this way, there's got to be a reason. Maybe I, like the rabbi in the previous story, wish my bread to be better, but this is probably the right way of sifting the second time your flour on Yantif, so we could go by her. Which is another way of saying, my father-in-law says this all the time, if you want to know what the halacha is in the Dorf kitchen, ask Marlon, right? Elliot has the ordination and the scholarship. Marlon runs that kitchen, right? What I love about this is it's not never, but it's rare that the Talmud essentially learns law from the women of their community. Now, this is a woman who learned her law from observing it from her father, because she didn't go to a yeshiva, but I love that the Talmud preserves that, right? So this, in contradistinction to the previous text, where the woman has said, you're being unnecessarily religious, this text says, if you're doing it, and you come from a place of substance, we're going to essentially rule like you do. It's not quite a historical precursor to the concept of female rabbis. Thankfully, we're living in a generation that exists. But it is a reminder that even in Talmudic times, they listened to scholars, and they also watched what religious people do. And when you watch what religious people do, sometimes that actually establishes the rule. Stevie. Excellent. Excellent. I'm going to repeat that a bit because we're doing this on Zoom also, that maybe the harmonization of the two positions is that it's proper to sift your flour a second time on Yantif in a way that is different than you would on Tuesday to show the Yantif is different, but not in a way that ruins the flour or diminishes it. You might lose a little bit, but you're not going to lose the quality. Very good. Good. Okay. Third text. I want to do it because we have to do the fourth text because we have to finish the Masechet. But I thought this one was also very interesting that it is preserved in the Talmud, a text written by rabbis for rabbis. Tana Rabbanan. We learned earlier. Maseh Rabbi Eliezer shaya yoshev v'doresh kol yom kulo b'halchot Yom Tov. Rabbi Eliezer was sitting and giving a drash the entire day on the laws of Yantif, and although it's not explicitly clear, it's clear in the commentaries he was doing it on Yantif. And the reason why that's significant is that it's one thing to give a shir on Yantif, but if you give a really long shir on Yantif, people will eventually say, it's time for me to go eat my Yantif meal. This is not Tuesday at yeshiva, this is Yantif, right? So I'm willing to hear, this is actually four matching content. It means that I should make this shorter, right? Because there's such a great kiddush waiting for you. So he spent the entire day teaching with the laws of Yantif. Yatzta kat rishona. The first group of students started to tiptoe out. You always sit closest to the door, because that way you can be the one to kind of sneak out when no one is watching. This clueless rabbi who thinks that everyone would want to spend the entire day studying with him said, Halalu ba'alei pitasim. Talmudic stories are very terse. You have to know a lot to understand what the words mean, or even when you know what the words mean, what it's telling you. These are owners of extremely large jugs. What it means is, jugs of, what did people keep in their large jugs? Either wine or oil. Here it's wine, basically saying, they must have a huge party to go to. If they weren't going back to a home with enormous qualities of amazing wine and shlivovitz, they'd obviously prefer to sit and study with me. I'll forgive them. Okay. Kachnia, a second group, leaves his class. Amar, halalu balei chaviot. They may not have huge jugs of wine, but they have barrels of wine, and I understand why you'd want to go back to barrels of wine. Kachlishit, he's not getting the picture. A third group has left. Has anyone left since I started teaching? I'm just curious. I want to know what kind of kosher Pesach whiskey they have at home. Amar halalu balei chadin. They have medium-sized jugs. All right, they want to go get a drink. If they didn't have that at home, they wouldn't leave. Katrivi'it, a fourth group leaves. Just parentheses. The Talmud is preserving a story of a rabbi going on too long, and people just leave it. Right? The rabbis are poking fun of their own class on some level. Halalu balei liginin. They've got jars. They don't have jugs, but they have some wine at home. Let them go. Kat chamishit, the fifth group leaves. Amar halalu balei kosod. They don't have jugs. They have cups, and they probably have some wine, so let them go. He has not once said to himself, what am I doing that's making them leave? He's just assuming that there's got to be some, bacchanal festival they can go to, which is the only reason that they would leave his class. Hitchilu kachishit letzeit. The sixth group started to sneak out of the room. Amar halalu ba'alei meira. These are people of a curse. Meaning, his understanding is the only reason why they would leave his teaching is if either they were going to get drunk or they're not worthy of blessing. He's never turning it on himself. Natan einav b'talmidim. He put his eyes on the students that remained. And that, by saying that, putting it aside, like he almost like gave them a stern, evil eye. Itchilu pneihem mishtanin. Their faces began to change, meaning they started to feel ashamed or embarrassed or nervous. He was going to curse them. They think that they're the next group to be spoken poorly of. Amar lehem, he said to them, you all stayed. If you stayed, I'm not going to curse you. Banai, my sons. Lo lachem ani omer, I'm not cursing you. Ela lahalalu shiatzu, those who left my class early are the ones I'm speaking of. Shemanichim chaye olam v'oskim b'chaye sha'a. Because they are, they're setting aside, they are jettisoning the activities that lead you to everlasting life, which is Torah study, and they're choosing instead to satisfy themselves in that moment, which is to have a l'chaim. Right? Interesting intertextuality between this and the Shammai Hillel conversation before. Right? Is the only thing that we are supposed to be doing, dedicating our life and our food and our time towards the Olam Haba, the next world experience, which is Shabbat, or are we not allowed to enjoy even this moment? But he's stringent on this, and he says, you guys stayed to hear my class. They don't deserve my compliment because they have a surrendered study for having a glass of wine. Bishat Patiratan, when the class was finally over and it was time for them all to leave, he gives them a blessing by basically quoting the 8th chapter of the book of Nehemiah at the end of the Bible. Lechu, go, ichlu, go eat, mishmanim, from the fatty good stuff, ushtu mamtikim, and drink sweet wine, v'shilchu manot, and send portions, le'ein nachono, to those who don't have any, ki kadosh hayom, because this day is holy, la'adonenu, our God, v'al teyatzavu, do not be sad, ki chedvat Adonai hi ma'uzchem, because God's joy is your strength. Meaning, you stayed to the end of the shiur, I give you my blessing, now go eat, and now go drink, and you can even give to those who don't have any. And speaking of the end of the lesson, we're almost there. And I will also apply the verse of Nehemiah to you. This is how Masechet Beitzah ends. What's interesting about the way it ends is that tractates often end with a flourish. They often end with a piece of sermonica, a mic drop, something that is not dry. And when a tractate ends dryly, like this one does, it's either, scholars are split. Either it's, well, maybe not every tractate ends with a flourish, or there's a flourish here that we're not getting at first glance, but maybe there's something big here, because tractates usually end that way. This section, I'm going to do quickly. It's exceedingly complicated. I'm not going to get into the complications, but it happens to be a really complicated conversation about the laws of which animals you're allowed to send out to pasture on Yontif. I'm just going to try to get you to the end so we can go have our drinks. At the very end, on just a couple of lines before the Talmud completes itself, it has one more Mishnah, right? The Talmud is a commentary on the Mishnah, so one last Mishnah. Ein mashkin v'shochatin et hamidbariot. You may not give water or shecht midbariot, desert animals. You are allowed to shecht an animal on Yontif, to eat it on Yontif, and you can certainly give it water, but you can't do it if it's called a midbar animal. A midbar animal, and we'll get the definition later, but basically one that is not normally near where you are, which means it has the category of, what's the word that describes something that you're not allowed to touch or be in relationship with if you don't have use for it on the holiday? Muktzah. Most of the time we talk about muktzah, we talk about it on Shabbat, right? Like if there were a pen on this bima right now, I certainly can't write with it, but I'm not even supposed to touch it because there's no permissible use of a pen on Shabbat. The laws of muktzah on Yontif are a little bit different, but if you had no intention of having any contact with something before Yontif began, then you shouldn't have any contact with it, even if it comes into your presence. So your midbar animals, your animals that are way out there, they pasture out there, you had no intention that you were going to have access to it, therefore you can't shecht it, and you're not supposed to give it water. Aval mashkin v'shochatin et habaytiot. But you're allowed to do that for your house animals. Elu hen baitot, halanot be'ir. What are considered house animals? The ones that sleep in the city. Midbariot, and what are desert animals? The ones that go spend most of their lives out there in the pasture. They never come into the town. Okay. I skipped a little bit. Tanu Rabbanan, we have another version or expanded version of this teaching. Elu hen midbariot ve'elu hen baitiot. What are considered desert animals? What are considered house domestic animals? Midbariot, desert animals, kol sheyotzot b'Pesach, all those that leave on Pesach, v'ra'ot ba'afar, and they pasture out there in the dust, and they don't come back. Nichnasot b'riviyah rishonah, they come back in the first big rainfall after Sukkot. That's why they're midbariyot, because half the year they're not even near us. Ve'elu hen baitot, and which are domestic animals? Kol sheyotzot v'ra'ot chutz latchum, those that go and they pasture out of the boundary of the town, uvaot v'lanot b'toch hatchum, but every night they come back near you. So desert ones are ones that spend half the year far away, and domestic ones, they're ones that, they pasture out there because there's not a pasture by your house, but they come into the town at night. Rabbi, when the Mishnah or the Talmud refers to rabbi, they're referring to one person, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, who was the editor of the Mishnah. He says, he's taking a more lenient view. That's what's significant for why I want to bring this to you. Elu ve'elu baitot hen. Those are all considered domestic, meaning you are allowed to shecht even the animals that spend 6 months a year pasturing out then. Elu ve'elu hein midbariot. What then are considered desert animals? Kol sheyotzot v'ra'ot ba'afar, those that pasture out there in the dust. Ve'ein nichnasot liyashuv, but they never come into the settlement. Lo b'yamot hachama, neither during the warm, hot days. Lo b'yamot hagshamim, neither in the days of rain. Putting aside the intricacies of the argument, I wanted to share this with you because A, it's the last line of the Talmud, and because of the structure. We're trying to understand when Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi gave this lenient position, which increases the category of animals that you're allowed to interact with on Yontif. Was he staking a position in disagreement of the sages, or was he just trying to understand the sages' position? These last pieces on the page 4 of your text is how this tractate ends. The Ibayat Ema, some people explain what Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was saying as follows. Ledivrehem de Rabbanan ka'amar lahu. He was stating his position, trying to understand generously, positively, the positions of the people with whom he disagreed. I want to say that again because that's the piece that's interesting to me, something that we never do in our society. To say and understand the positions of the people with whom we disagree as generously as possible, so we can at least imagine the fullest and most acceptable version of the ideas of our adversaries. We take the opposite view these days. If you haven't read it yet, Monica Osborne has a wonderful article in this week's Jewish Journal that goes in this direction about how important it is to understand with nuance the position even of the people you're going to disagree with. So basically, they reread Rabbi Yehuda Nasi saying, Ledidi ein muktzah. No, I don't consider any of these animals to be muktzah. But I'm trying to understand and explain to your position to you better than you understand your position. Ela ledidchu, but to you rabbis who have a more stringent position, Oduli, will you not at least agree with me? Hecha diotzot v'ra'ot, those that go out and they pasture by Pesach, out at this time of year. V'nichnasot b'rviyah rishonah, but they don't come back until the first rain. Debait yohen, can we at least agree on this middle position that, yeah, I agree that on the extreme case those are desert, and the extreme case these are house, but can we agree on this one? He's trying to understand the full extent of their position. And interestingly, the Talmud ends with this either mic drop or whisper. Ba'amaru lehi Rabbanan, the rabbi said to him, no, I disagree. Midbariotem. Those are considered desert animals, and they cannot be shechted or given water on Yontif. I don't know if that's a whimper or a mic drop. It might just be like, the editor of Masechet Beitzah said, I'm done. Like, call it a day. And it ends with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi suggesting something to the rabbis. I'm saying, yeah, that's not the way it is. Or it's the rabbis ending a tractate, valorizing the idea of the rabbis disagreeing on the application of law, disagreeing on the ideology or the philosophy that contributed to their interpretation, and still sharing the page together and trying to understand each other and consider each other's positions and try to see is there any overlap so that we can have more shared and is different. Because we are different people. The rabbis of the Talmud were different from one another, but they were part of the same family of trying to live out and interpret and gift us with a Jewish civilization that we're still involved in 2,000 years later. So it could be that the sentences I just said are not really what was going on. It may have just been, this is the end. But I like to think of it as the rabbis ending this tractate saying, see, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is trying so hard to understand the sages' position and even offered them a compromise. And the sages listened, and ultimately they said no. Sometimes someone offers you a compromise and you take it seriously, like, yeah, I'm going to hold my ground. Because holding your ground is also part of religious life. It's also part of human life. Say, ad kan v'tulo, I can go this far, I can't go further. But I'm going to listen. And I'm going to try. And if there's anything that we can claim to be under the same tent, same time, I'm going to try to do that. Because that's what it means to live in community, even in a community of people who disagree with each other. That is how Masechet Beitzah ends. Please rise and I'll recite the Siyyum. Then you can go to your jugs of wine. Sorry. Hadran alach Masechet Beitzah v'hadrachalan. We will return to you Masechet Beitzah. It's going to be a long time until I return to it. V'hadrachalan, and you will return to me. Alach. Datan alach Masechet Beitzah v'datachalan. We'll keep thinking of you. Lo nitneshe minach Masechet Beitzah v'lo titneshe minan. We will not depart from you. Please don't depart from us. Laba alma hadein v'laba alma da'ate. Say that 3 times. Hadran alach Masechet Beitzah v'hadrachalan. Datan alach Masechet Beitzah v'datachalan. Lo nitneshe minach Masechet Beitzah v'lo titneshan minan. Laba alma hadein v'laba alma da'ate. Hadran alach Masechet Beitzah v'hadrachalan. Datan alach Masechet Beitzah v'datachalan. Lo nitneshe minach Masechet Beitzah v'lo titneshe minan. Laba alma hadein v'laba alma da'ate. I'm not going to translate each piece of this, but it's basically saying, may I continue to study more text, and I thank all the rabbis whom I studied inside this text. Chanina bar Papa, Rami bar Papa, Nachman bar Papa, Achai bar Papa, Avai, Abamari bar Papa, Rafram bar Papa, Rachish bar Papa, Sorcha bar Papa, Ada bar Papa, Daro bar Papa. Papa had a lot of children. Harevna Adonai Eloheinu divrei Toratcha befinu befiyod amcha beYisrael. V'niyeh kulanu anachnu v'tzeiseinu v'tzeisei amcha beYisrael. Kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratcha me'oivai techakmeinu mitzvotecha ki l'olam hili. Hili bitamim b'chukecha laman lo yivosh. Laman lo eshkach b'kudecha ki bam chitani. Baruch atah Adonai lamdeni chukakecha. Amen, amen, amen. Selah v'ed. Modim anachnu lefanecha, Adonai Eloheinu v'lebeteinu, shesamta chalkeinu miyoshvei Beit HaMidrash, v'lo samta chalkeinu miyoshvei kranot, she'anu mashkimin v'hem mashkimin, anu mashkimin l'divrei Torah, v'hem mashkimin l'divreihem tehillim, anu amelim v'hem amelim, anu amelim u'mikablim schar, v'hem amelim v'einam mikablim schar, anu ratzim v'hem ratzim, anu ratzim l'chai olam haba, hem ratzim lebe'er shachar, shamar v'ata Elohim turidim, lebe'er shachar anshei damim u'mirma, lo yechatzu yimehem v'ani eftach bach. Almost done. ירצון פניך אדוני אלוהי, כשם שעזרתני לסיים מסכת ביצה, כך כן תעזרני להתחיל מסכתות ספרים אחרים, ולסיימם ללמוד, ללמד, לשמור, לעשות ולקיים כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. וזכות כל התנאים והאמוראים ותלמידי חכמים ויעמוד לי ולזרי שלא תמוש התורה מפי זרי וזרע זרי עד עולם ויתקיים בי בהתהלכך תנחה אותך בשוכבך תשמור עליך והקיצותה היא תשיחך כי בי ירבו ימיך ויוסיפו לך שנות חיים. אורך ימים במינה בשמאלה אושר וכבוד. אדוני עוז לי מויתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. ויעלמד דהבה לעתיד להתחדדת ולחיה מתיה ולעסקה לחיו על עלמא ולמבני קרתא דרושלם ולשכלל היכלי בגבי ולמעקר פולחנה נוחאה מערה ולעטבה פולחנה דשמיא לאתרי וימליך קודשה בריחו במלכותי ביקרי וחייכון וימלכון וחד חובי שו בגלי בזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבם ברך לעולם לעולמי עלמיה יברך וישתבח ויתפאר שמה וינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ותלש ונקודשה בריחו לעילם מן כל ברכתה ושורתה ושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בימה ויאמרו אמן. על ישראל ועל רבנן ועל תלמידיהון ועל כל תלמידיהון ועל כל מאן דעסקים ברתא דיבי אתרהדין ודיבי כל אתר ואתר. יהי להון הון שלמה רבה אחינה וחסדי ורחמים לחיים אריכי מזוני ריחי ופורקנה מן קודם ובהונדי ושמיא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מצ'מיא וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. ועשה שלום ברמיו וברחמיו יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. Thank you. I'm now studying Masechet Bava Metzia. I think it has about, 87 pages. So in about a year and a half, we'll have another Siyyum